Hey there, everybody. This is Jordan Sather reporting to you from Autism 1, and they've tasked me to be behind the desk for about an hour here. I have an online brand called Destroying the Illusion on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, etc. It has hundreds of thousands of followers, and I do a lot of reporting on the truth that I think the public needs to know, such as health, vaccine awareness, etc. And I am here at the desk with Dr. James Lyons Weiler. He is the CEO and director of the Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge, and we're going to chat here for a little bit. How you doing, James?
Good, Josh. How you doing?
Doing good. How do you liking the conference here?
Oh, it's an excellent conference. I mean, the quality of the presentations, the science that's being presented, the policy positions, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and there's a lot of families here too. A lot of parents that are looking to figure out what's going on with their child, because they've unfortunately endured an experience in their own life that started to wake them up a little bit. So I wanted to discuss with you, we were just talking a moment ago about censorship. Censorship, something that we both encountered plenty of, a little bit differently, but I want to get your experience on how and where you've been censored and for what about.
Yeah, sure. So like most people who are vaccine risk aware on Facebook, the deboosting and that kind of thing, delisting, the charges and allegations that we're spreading vaccine misinformation and violating community standards, baloney, when we can reliably and reproducibly count on the CDC website for vaccine misinformation.
Right. Projection, 100% projection.
100% narcissistic projection. But so back in 2017, I think it was, there was a movement to weaken the MMR vaccine information sheets because somebody got the idea that they were too scary. To tell the truth about vaccine risk on the MMR was too scary. So there was a move to weaken the language, and they invited public comment. And in this public comment period, some well-known, pro-vaccine, anti-choice, vaccine risk unaware people, whoever, submitted their public comments, and they were published.
Were they ghostwritten?
Yeah, must
Jokes.
have been. Bernadette Pager and I decided to co-write a statement citing science about why the sheets should not be changed. In fact, they should be strengthened. And we submitted our comments, and all the public comments, the deadline passed for a submission, and 575 comments or so were published, but 75 were missing, we could tell. And ours was missing. Among the missing, there were 75 that were not yet published. So we wrote to them and said, we can tell that you're not publishing all of them. Obviously, we don't see our own, but there were comments from Mary Holland and Andrew Wakefield and other people that were also not published yet. And they wrote back to us in a couple of days with our comments redacted. They actually took electronic black marker and blacked out entire paragraphs of our comment.
Is this the intelligence community or something? Like, who are we dealing with here?
I'm not sure intelligence has much to do with it.
Yeah, seriously.
But so we called a friend of mine named Jim Moody. He's a lawyer. And I said, would you please remind the CDC that in the United States we have, the Constitution, we have the First Amendment, freedom of speech. I mean, it's the First Amendment. It's the first one, Josh. Right? And so a couple of days after we wrote to them on lawyerly letterhead, they unredacted our comment and they published all the rest of them because we had asked them to, or that there was going to be a lawsuit. We threatened a suit.
Totally.
And they folded. So our comments were published. Now they have finally released, just the other day, the updated VIS that they proposed weakened. I haven't read it yet. But now that they've taken action on it,
so you're saying they're trying to literally rewrite the vaccine inserts themselves?
Not the product information sheet, but
Gotcha.
Every time you go to the doctor, the doctor's supposed to by law give you a vaccine information sheet
Gotcha.
before they vaccinate your child. Not on the way out the door. Here's your
Right.
vaccine. By the way, read this on the way
Or
home.
have them in the slits that are on the wall that you can take if you want to take it. They're supposed to hand it
By
right
law, they're
to you.
supposed to review it. And that's part of the informed consent procedure, and they routinely break the law. But having done that now, we're waiting, for an analysis of those VIS sheets, and Jim Moody tells me that we may have a lawsuit. If they weakened them and ignored public comment, we might be able to put a stay on the change of the VIS and get the old VIS out there again.
Good news.
So we'll see with that. It seems to be like these days, like I'm suing everyone. I just won a lawsuit against the Allegheny County Board of Health. They had tried to mandate the HPV vaccine in a county of Allegheny in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, gotcha.
And we
mandate HPV
vaccine. Yeah.
For what age group and
The first time they tried to mandate it, it was for people entering the 7th grade.
Gotcha.
For students entering the 7th grade.
Boys
so
and girls.
It was going to be a school. Yeah, it was going to be a school mandate, a requirement before school. Now, Pennsylvania has philosophical and medical exemptions, but nevertheless, what does getting an HPV vaccine have to do with your school attendance? You damn well better not be transmitting HPV in school. It should not be happening.
Yeah.
Someone's going to be investigated if that's happening.
It's like getting the Hep B when you're a day old.
Exactly. We have a bigger problem than vaccination if we're transmitting HPV in schools.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we went to the meeting, and you can see the video of this online. The second time they tried to mandate it, well, the first time they tried to mandate it, I put a stop to it just by asking for what's called a point of order clarification. So they had called for a vote on the mandate, but they hadn't had full public comment on it. And it's very wonkish, it's very, administrative. But I stood up and I said, I have a point of order clarification question. And they said, what is it? And I said, aren't we supposed to have open-ended public comment on this? You're going to put a vote to it. The public's supposed to be able to comment on it. So they ended up turfing that to committee for 2 years. They found out that there was a radio talk show host, Marty Griffin, who came down with throat cancer. And it's terrible for anybody to have throat cancer, to go through the chemo that he did. Terrible, terrible, terrible. But we know that Marty Griffin also used to smoke, because he led an anti-smoking campaign, a quit smoking campaign years ago. But the UPMC doctors told him that the HPV, that the vaccine, that the cancer that he had in his throat was actually related to HPV. So he became proselytized on the air every day, saying, "Get your kid vaccinated. You don't want this."
Oh, gotcha.
So he became a real advocate.
Uh-huh.
And so then somebody told me that he said on the air that there's a big surprise for the so-called what I would say so-called anti-vaxxers. I'm not anti-vaccine. Mm-hmm. Both of my kids are fully vaccinated.
That label they put out there, anti-vaxxer, it's very akin to the conspiracy theorist label. They can throw that out there and very easy to discredit.
To try to discredit. I say try to discredit because it's too
powerful.
Attempt.
Yes.
Attempt to. And they have failed. I'm still publishing peer-reviewed science, and I'm still doing research. But anyway, so the word came down that they had a surprise waiting for us in the Allegheny County courthouse. So we showed up, and there was no HPV vaccine topic on the agenda, but Marty was scheduled to talk, he and his wife, and they didn't show up at all. But we showed up. And so in the middle of the meeting, out of the blue, the director of the Allegheny County Board of Health pulled out a packet and said, would everybody pull out your packet? I'm not going to read the whole thing. This is a non-binding resolution that the Allegheny County Board of Health recommends the HPV vaccine for all children before they enter school, all ages, in all counties in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
How many ways is that wrong, right? Like overreach. They're baiting me. Something was wrong here. So I waited until it went to motion to vote, and just before the vote, I stood up again. I called them out on a process question. They immediately started shouting at me and yelling at me, "Sit down, we're going to have you forcibly removed." They're waving at the guard to come over to have me forcibly removed. Before she got there, I sat down because I had what I needed on video. What I had on video was them saying, "I'm not going to read the whole thing," and pulling this non-binding resolution out of thin air. There was no deliberation by the Allegheny County Board of Health. So I called a lawyer in Harrisburg who specializes in what's called the Sunshine Act, open meetings, right? So there's rules in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as there are in all states, on how meetings are supposed to proceed. And they apparently, according to me, according to my lawyer, looked like they violated the Sunshine Act. So we sued them on that grounds, and then they wanted to settle within like 36 hours it was filed,
Wow.
or something short.
They said, "Oh crap."
They're like, yeah, well, we probably don't want to get into this. Don't
Yeah.
want to get into the weeds on this. But what they didn't know is that there was a county councilwoman present. Her name is Sue Means. And the next week, she went to the Allegheny County Council, and she gave a statement. It was just before Thanksgiving last year. She gave a statement about how she was appalled at the way that the Allegheny County Board of Health was apparently violating the Sunshine Act, dismissive of public comments, maybe trying to get around the authority of the county council and perhaps the state legislature by slipping in a non-binding resolution that then they would try to enforce as a mandate. Mm-hmm. And she called for a hearing. Well, that hearing hasn't taken place because the hearing idea was taken over by another councilman who was more affiliated with the Health and Human Services Department, and they turned it into like a science day. Let's have your scientists come talk to our scientists. We'll do, and what comes of a discussion? Nothing, just understanding.
Especially
right?
when you have, these scientists versus these scientists, that one of the groups is going to have cognitive dissonance and not going to agree with the other group. So,
right. So Mary Holland, of course, agreed to come. I was going to talk, and Karen Hacker, who is the vice president of the Allegheny County Council, apparently declined to participate. And so it just went poof. So now the parents of Allegheny County are showing up at the county council meeting demanding a public hearing on the Allegheny County Board of Health's behavior, looking at the conflicts of interest of its director, looking under the hood, getting down in the weeds.
if only we could get this done in every single state, not just Pennsylvania. I'm from Washington State, and that's one of the epicenters of the, quote, outbreaks that are allegedly happening. And
Remind me, how many people died out there in Washington from measles?
how many people have lived? All of them. Nobody has died.
Nobody died?
Nobody died. Wow, yeah.
No one died?
Nobody. And in fact, if you go to the CDC website itself, they have a statistics sheet. I've been tracking this. It's called the Wonder in the title or in the URL or something like that. On this statistics sheet that's updated, they update it every week. It has 2 cases of measles listed in Washington.
2
On
verified
the CDC
cases.
website, I can give you the URL after this. 2, when in the media they're claiming there have been 80, 100, which is why they've been trying to remove the exemptions and
Well,
get
wait
the
a minute.
mandates
Didn't the Secretary of Health say that there are going to be 57 cases a week?
Exactly.
Didn't he say that?
Yeah,
I think he
did.
said 57 cases a week.
So
So let's have a moment of silence for all those people who died in the state of Washington for measles. So anyway,
wow.
that was a
Quick
short
moment there. Yeah.
Nothing against anyone dying from measles. Believe me, it's not a joke. Measles is a serious condition for some people. But the thing of it is, I work for IPAC, the Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge. We did some monetary collection for the governor, Jay Inslee, because apparently his Secretary of Health didn't educate him that you can really take care of the measles symptoms with high doses of vitamin C.
I don't know if anybody can educate Jay
Well, we
Inslee.
didn't educate. What we wanted to do, and we did this, is we took out, for every $5 that was sent in, we sent to Governor Jay Inslee a bottle of vitamin A. For those poor people of the state of Washington who are suffering under this plague of measles and dropping dead
Have you
like flies in
actually
the streets.
met anybody that's had measles over the last 6 months?
Personally,
have you
no.
met anybody that's met anybody?
Yes,
who's
I
had
have.
measles? Okay,
I have. Certainly.
all right. You're the first
Slavic
person.
community out there. There's a legislator out there who's a defender of freedom. He's a great guy. Sean, what's his name? Scott something. Anyway, they're going to kill me for not remembering it, but he's a great guy. He is a representative of those of the Slavic community.
Okay, gotcha.
So I have it direct from him that yes.
I'm just, seeing that CDC statistics sheet saying 2 cases in Washington when media reported 100. It also reported 130 in New York when I think news was saying much more than that. It's 500, 500 or something. So I'm curious if this whole outbreak was made up itself. Sounds like there are cases occurring, but it's much more inflated.
Well, let's
than it
look
really
at
is.
it. Let's look at it this way. So there are 3 ways that the vaccine and the vaccinated can spread measles. Okay, they want to blame the anti-vaxxers, the unvaccinated.
Right.
The first way is that you acquire a measles-like rash from the vaccine, and you can transmit the measles vaccine type, right?
Yeah.
So all
Yeah.
these kids that are vaccinated against the measles with the MMR go to school, and if there's an immunocompromised kid sitting in that classroom, that measles type from the vaccine, although it's attenuated, can still be deadly.
In these outbreaks, do they test for the type of measles?
That's a big question. So around the states, I've been chasing these statistics down, trying to get to the bottom of it. What type of measles is it? We've submitted FOIAs. The FOIAs come back saying they're looking into it. New Jersey said, well, that's going to violate HIPAA, privacy, patient privacy. No, it's not. We just want to know the type of measles. We don't need any names. Exactly. Line them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tell me the types.
Redact it all, like you redacted the other documents.
Exactly. So I'm telling the health freedom groups, one of the pieces of legislation that everyone needs to work on is to pass a law that says when there's a measles outbreak that you need real-time genotyping of the measles with real-time reporting on the website, so that if it's vaccine related, before you announce that you have a case, right? In Michigan, they said, well, we have an outbreak in Ann Arbor, and then they said, oops, vaccine type. Okay, so the second way that the vaccine can promote the transmission of measles is because the vaccine is so old. It was made in 1960. Just like the mumps portion is probably defunct because of mutations. I'm an evolutionary biologist, so in the wild type is evolving as wild type viruses do, and when they grow the virus in the lab, the Gerald Lynn type of the mumps or the measles strain,
going to be the same year after year.
They're going to have different mutations here on this lineage than on this lineage. So they're evolving away from each other at twice the rate that you would expect if you weren't thinking. So I did the math. There's 6 vaccines on the CDC schedule that are likely to be so attenuated that they're no longer effective. And what happens then is kind of the normal life cycle of a vaccine that you keep around too long is you end up with initially you got a strong vaccine. It reduces the rate of replication of the virus in the body. That's fine. But then later on, like the pertussis, we know pertussis is a failed vaccine. It does not stop the infection. It does not stop transmission. It stops symptoms. So you're walking around with pertussis in your throat, maybe in the upper respiratory tract, and you're spreading it, but you have no idea that you should get antibiotics. And that if you're vaccinated. If you're unvaccinated, you have symptoms, and you go, what's this cough? It won't go away. I need some medicine. Well, we know it's true in mumps. We know it's true in chickenpox, and we know it's true in pertussis. I did the deep literature dive as a result of this outbreak, and lo and behold, the Japanese figured out many years ago asymptomatic transmission and asymptomatic or subclinical infection happens with measles. And even some of our best scientists were saying last year that it doesn't happen because the CDC website says that there's no known asymptomatic carrier. So more mad vaccine information, misinformation from the CDC website.
It can happen so simply.
It's so
all you need is maybe one line, one headline, and then goes down the grapevine.
So asymptomatic transmission is real, and what that means is that another way that kids can bring measles into the classroom and possibly affect the immunocompromised is to get the vaccine and then pick up the wild type measles from somebody who had either a symptomatic case or a subclinical case. And if they can bring that subclinically into the school's not going to know that there's a transmission chain. They won't even know it. Unless there's some anti-vaccinated kids around that develop, symptoms.
Yeah.
So I went to Connecticut and I told the committee there, wouldn't it be nice to have some unvaccinated kids around in the school in case there is a transmission chain, and then we can detect it and protect the immunocompromised? Boy, they didn't like that. They just said they were offended because that
Sign me up to be that unvaccinated kid, right?
Yeah, right, Josh. So that he said he was offended because that puts one kid's health at risk to benefit others. Does that sound familiar? For the good of the many. Come on, take the hit.
But your argument was, hey, we can actually benefit everybody with knowing what strain it is, etc.
We can benefit everybody, and the unvaccinated can have their constitutional rights respected.
Wow.
The freedom of religion. It was a freedom of religion thing.
But herd immunity.
Well, let's talk about herd immunity. So, herd immunity works in cattle. Do you know why it works in cattle?
Because they're herds.
That's one. Well, what do we do to herds? We vaccinate them, we feed them, and then what do we do to them? We slaughter them. We're not looking for 20 and 30 years lifetime immunity.
Yeah.
Right? If you kept...
And aren't these herds all kept together, too? There's no outside influence in the herds. They're kept in that container.
They're kept together, and we don't keep them around very long. We might keep them for 1 or 2 seasons. I have no idea. I have no idea how long you keep steer around before you slaughter them or whatever, or sheep before, But, in flocks, I suppose you keep them around for the wool. But the point is, in a herd of cattle, you're going to be bringing them to the slaughterhouse, and you're injecting them with all these kinds of steroids and growth hormones, so you get more meat, more protein per hoof, right?
Yeah.
But
and then we eat that meat, right? Full of vaccines and RBGH.
Yummy. So in humans, we have no lifetime immunity from measles now. The kids that were originally immune got the natural, before the vaccine, they got the natural immunity from colostrum in the breast milk from their mother, who had a natural infection, and that was passed on as passive immunity. The kids that were vaccinated with the MMR were in fact immune for a period of time, and the adults in the population in 1960 were all immune from natural immunity. So it looked like herd immunity. So now the vaccinated kids have grown up to be adults. They have waning immunity. It's gone. They're right. So what I tell the legislators is, when the white man came to North America, measles and smallpox wiped out large portions of the Native American population because they had no natural immunity. When the white man went to Australia, measles wiped out a large portion of the Aboriginal population because they had no natural immunity. Now, pharma has created a very large population of adults that has no natural immunity. Isn't that clever?
What do you think's going to happen?
So, good thing we have like immunoglobulin therapy, and that we have vitamin A, and we have modern medicine. Mm-hmm. We know how to control fevers, not with acetaminophen, please. But so it's a different world, right? We have better sanitation. Okay,
right.
So the last person that died from measles was out in Washington, but she really didn't die from measles. She was an immunocompromised woman who picked up a measles type, it's unknown what type, from a vaccinated man in a clinic where she was being treated. And
blows her mind. Like, this subject is so complex. Even each individual story is so complex, but yet in the media what we read is 3 paragraphs of this is what happened.
Get your damn
Go
vaccines.
Get your vaccine.
Yeah. Get your damn vaccine.
And I also find it interesting is that many of these recent outbreaks we have, like there was one of whooping cough in LA schools. There were some private schools in LA. And then one of mumps on a naval ship called the USS Fort McHenry. I think it's still floating around out there. I don't think it's docked yet.
Circles in the Mediterranean.
Yeah. Both of these outbreaks, 100% vaccinated population. In the LA schools, 100% vaccinated population.
Sounds
of
like
course, military.
Sounds like a waning immunity problem, but more so it sounds like a failed vaccine problem. Mm-hmm. This is vaccine failure. So you have primary vaccine failure, it just doesn't take in a 3% or so. And then you have secondary vaccine failure where you try to boost and the vaccine's just not working. And that's likely due to an inexact match between the vaccine type and the type that's actually circulating. So those families of those sailors on that ship they're going out of their minds because they're all confined in this space.
I believe that ship was supposed to dock months ago, 4 or 5 months ago.
And I've written an article on how that poses the Merck poses a national security threat, because if that can happen in one Navy ship.
It's funny you say that. I was reading an article from the Washington Post the other day, and they actually tasked their national security correspondent to write an article on why we need vaccines mandated. The Washington Post tasked their national security, and it was a national security correspondent who used to work in the Bush and Clinton administrations, of all places.
You mean, so I saw an article by Joe Lieberman and someone else, so former...
It wasn't Joe Lieberman, it was, I think it was a woman.
Yeah, okay, so they want hundreds of Navy ships. To be shut down due to mumps. Is that what they were really shooting for?
I guess what they're shooting for is to completely isolate the military. And then, well, apparently, and in this LA school as well. I mean, whooping cough, 100%. It was incredible. In the media articles they were writing, they didn't want to admit that it was a 100% vaccinated population.
Yeah.
So they wrote, nobody that had the disease was unvaccinated. There was all sorts of double, triple negatives they were writing because they didn't want to admit everybody that got the shots were vaccinated. Nobody that didn't get the disease were unvaccinated.
Yeah, let's use plain English. Syracuse University, major basketball event, totally shut down. The school lost millions of dollars in revenue. This was 2 years ago.
Wow.
And the Syracuse Reporter wrote about William Thompson. There's an article out now, a few years ago, in a Canadian version of the Huffington Post, saying that Merck has some explaining to do over the months because of that whistleblower case in Pennsylvania, where the two virologists said, we used to work at Merck, and when we tested the vaccine, we were nowhere near 96% effective, so we were not going to get the contract. So our bosses told us, go out, get some rabbit antibodies, and stick the rabbit antibodies into human samples and fool the FDA, defraud the FDA. And we're waiting on a ruling for that case. So it's a serious business. If you're considering mandates on a vaccine that is then the next year ruled to be a fraudulent vaccine, what have you done?
Doesn't Merck make the MMR vaccine?
Merck makes the MMR vaccine.
Didn't Merck just expand one of their plants by about $1 billion and add thousands of new jobs and say that they're getting record profits due to their vaccines this year?
I think you're hinting that the measles outbreaks are good for Merck stock.
Right?
I mean, same thing with HPV. If you get an HPV mandate, the stock goes up.
Yeah,
because
Gardasil too. Merck makes Gardasil.
Yeah, you get a mumps outbreak, a measles outbreak, the stock goes up. Then they get to announce that they made a new factory, so stock goes up.
They've made hundreds of millions of dollars in record-breaking profits this year. Serious stuff.
So what do you think is going to happen? Where are we going to be in 3 years with Merck's MMR?
You know, you were bringing up a point earlier when you were talking about what's going on in Pennsylvania, in that it was the public's awareness that forced the politicians to have to be transparent.
That's right.
And we mentioned, RBGH growth hormone earlier. We all know back in the 90s that it was public awareness that forced, basically, people stopped buying the bad stuff.
Right.
People stopped buying the bad stuff because they became aware. So what we have to do now is simply get the public aware. We have to fight through the fake news media and whatever fake science we're being given and bring them the data, the actual unbiased evidence, and say, hey, you need to make up your mind, become a little more aware, and then through our choices, we change
so
the game.
what do they have left is censorship. So to go back to the censorship issue, IPAC, the Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge, and First Freedoms ran a conference in New Jersey weeks after the Senate hearings, like 2 weeks after the Senate hearing. It was great. And Michael Sussman and Patty Finn came to the conference, and they announced that they had turned back Ed Day's mandate. You're going to arrest people, we're going to fine them just for breathing air and not being vaccinated in public.
Probably try and tax them on that air too.
And so we ran this conference. It was the First Freedoms IPAC conference on censorship, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Great number of presenters. Now we're going to do it again in Columbus. Don't have a date yet, but then we're going to go out to Seattle. So
cool.
We're going to come and see you in Seattle with a conference. It'll be the
Any
third
sort of
version.
idea when?
Well, I think it's
year,
going to be
next
a good 7 or 8 months before we get to Seattle.
Gotcha.
Because what we're doing is we're
Maybe
collecting,
later this year.
we're collecting local legal talent. We want to collect local legal talent that want to talk to the public about their First Amendment rights. And what I'm really looking to do is do case law review. It's the most boring stuff that you can, right? But think about it. We're at a point in time right now where if the public is not educated on what their rights are and why the law works the way that it works, and what the precedents are that could be cited, and then how do we know how to begin to ask the right questions when we're being censored?
Cool.
So this is an educational summit. It was great. We had over 100 people show up, and it's available at the First Freedoms website, firstfreedoms.org, to view the videos of the presentations. They're fabulous. Bob Krakow, Patty Finn, Michael Sussman, Mary Holland. I presented, Kevin presented. And knowing the history of how we got into this situation is really key. Mm-hmm. But I have two sons, they're 19 and 17, and from the time that they could think, I taught them to think in terms of history. We can't understand anything of how things are the way they are unless we understand history.
Mm-hmm. Truly.
It's not a boring topic. It's a fascinating topic. So, right on.
Well, awesome, James. Thank you so much for hanging out, talking to the people.
Thank you.
And when you hit up Seattle, I'll definitely work to be there. So
Yeah,
I'm
stay in
excited
touch
for
with IPAC at ipaknowledge.org and check out my blog,
IPAknowledge.org.
ipaknowledge.org. Put that in your cerebrum. And you can check out my blog at jameslyonsweiler.com. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So.